Every night on TV, Johnny Carson smiled at his guests, but that smile was really hate for one famous person. This guest could come on the show whenever he felt like it. He sent his jokes ahead of time. There were scripts for every conversation. Carson did not want to say no. He claimed to like this man for 30 years, while he was really mad at him behind closed doors. Even joked about how stiff the guests were being in front of his workers. This fight between big TV companies has been kept secret for years. Let's start. John Wayne Carson was born in Corning, Iowa, on October 23, 1925. He grew up in a simple home with an older sister and a younger brother. Dreams always seemed far away. Johnny and his family moved to Norfolk, Nebraska, when he was 8 years old. That's where his life began to change in a quiet way. He found a magic book at a friend's house one day. He felt something after reading that book. He got a cheap magic set in the mail and practiced day and night, chasing his family around the house and telling them, "Pick a card, any card." His mom made him a cape, and by the time he was 14, Johnny was making $3 a show, as the great Carson in small-town clubs. The first shows he did helped him become the artist he would become. World War II was going on when Johnny turned 18. After joining the U.S. Navy, he went through a program to become an officer. While he was at Columbia University learning how to be a soldier, he never stopped performing magic tricks for other people. He was then sent to work on the USS Pennsylvania. While the ship lived through Pearl Harbor, it took a lot of damage before Johnny got there. Decoding enemy messages was part of his job, which needed accuracy and patience. He had to oversee the removal of 20 dead soldiers as one of his first, sad, and unforgettable tasks. The war finished a few days after he got on the ship, but he stayed in the service and boxed in amateur matches, where he had a great record. When the Secretary of the Navy asked Johnny what he was going to do next, it was a big deal. He had Johnny do a magic trick for him. When the tough secretary laughed and smiled, Johnny knew he could make anyone laugh. He used the GI Bill to go to the University of Nebraska after the war and got his degree in radio and speech in just 3 years. Writing funny things for the radio was his thesis. He began working at WWAM and WWTV in Omaha in 1950. His first day TV show, The Squirrel's Nest, had a lot of silly things on it, like pretending to talk to birds. He held church dinners at night to make extra money, and sometimes he made fun of the politicians who came. Johnny got lucky when the wife of a politician who owned stock in a Los Angeles station told him about a job in California. Over time, he became the host of a low-budget TV show called Carson's Cellar. This made Red Skelton notice him. Johnny was hired by Skelton to write, but fate had other ideas. He got hurt one night right before a live show. Johnny filled in and amazed everyone. All of a sudden, everyone in the business knew his name. He came to New York City in 1957 to host a game show called Who Do You Trust? Question and answer time wasn't the only thing on the show. It was about being able to think quickly, read people, and make people laugh on the spot. Jackie Lee got better every day, and that's also where he met Ed McMahon, with whom he would work together for decades. As Carson's fame grew, NBC began looking for a new host for The Tonight Show to replace Jack Paar. Someone smart, funny, and able to stay cool was needed. Carson was the clear choice. John Carson took over The Tonight Show on October 1, 1962, and TV would never be the same again. Carson made the show his own from the start. He kept the first speech short and to the point, and he never made many jokes about the same thing. He made sure that the jokes, skits, interviews, and songs were all played at the right times. Even though the writers pushed him, he wouldn't talk about politics because he thought the show should be open to everyone. Moving the show from New York to Burbank, California in 1972 was a brave thing for him to do. He made it easy for Hollywood stars to get to him, and it worked. It became possible to make a living on The Tonight Show. You were good to go if Johnny liked you. He might never ask you back if he didn't. He hosted more than 4,500 episodes and changed what late-night TV was all about by the time he quit in 1992. After shows, Johnny was a different person. He was quiet and seemed far away. Before the show, he didn't meet any people. He thought it kept the mood real when the cameras were rolling. Behind-the-scenes worker Barbara Meltzer said Carson was quiet and careful, keeping all his sparkle for the stage. Short meetings were held before tapings. Johnny liked to know just enough to keep things going, but not too much so that he could be surprised. He didn't like ad breaks because they got in the way of the conversation. If a speaker was in the middle of a great story, he would sometimes look irritated when the commercial break was over. Johnny did things in his own unique way when he didn't like a guest. He wasn't pretending to laugh. Johnny would switch his attention to the band instead of the guest, if he thought they were boring or acting. There was no doubt that the guest had blown it. Johnny didn't like it when famous people like Bob Hope looked stiff, or like they were reading from a script. Johnny Carson smiled for the camera from 1962 to 1992, but he was angry inside. He was most upset about how powerful Bob Hope was at NBC. Since 1950, Hope had been a well-known face on the network. Because he was so powerful, he could get on The Tonight Show at any time. To get booked for a show, Hope only had to pick up the phone, call the right person, and tell them about it. There's no need to wait or ask, just tell. Carson didn't want to do it, but he had to. He would sigh and say again and again before giving in every time Hope's team called. It got so bad that Carson's staff joked about giving Hope a studio changing room that she could use all the time. Millions of people watched Carson every night, but he still had to bow down to Hope. He would joke with his team and say, "You can't turn down Bob Hope." It wasn't just the preference that was a problem. It was how Hope dealt with public events. Carson loved having real conversations. He liked jokes that just flowed off his tongue and stories that seemed real. That's not what Hope did. He would send his writers a full script with jokes, questions, and answers planned out ahead of time. Everything was set in stone by the time Hope sat down on the couch. We didn't really talk or have any fun. It was tough. It wasn't real. Carson was mad at it. Hope wouldn't budge from the plot at all. Hope would flip through his cue cards like he was reading a play, while Carson could joke about anything from politics to space. It hurt to see Carson try to make it look normal. One author said it was like smiling while watching a man die. They got angry with each other sometimes behind closed doors. Hope did something wrong at Ronald Reagan's first state dinner in January 1981. Carson was meant to be the main speaker. It was later on, and Hope had a smaller part. But right before the show, Hope gave Carson some jokes she had written by hand and said, "Here, maybe you can use these." Carson smiled and said, "Thanks, but I'm good." As soon as Hope left, Carson yelled at his team, "Can you believe that guy has nerve?" Another time, Hope asked Carson if he could use the sound of his crowd laughing for one of his specials after a great speech that made everyone roar. Carson was shocked and agreed. Carson said that he could hear Ed McMahon's laugh while watching TV with friends a few weeks later. This made Hope's bad jokes sound better. Carson told that story for years afterward, sometimes laughing and sometimes getting mad. Their feud wasn't just about slights against each other. The old and the new were at odds with each other. Hope stood for the old NBC, radio, and the 1950s. Carson was the new king because he had new jokes and a better look. Carson had to use a studio that had been built for Hope, a $3 million project in the 1950s, when he moved The Tonight Show from New York to Burbank. The studio would still give Hope's the show whenever he wanted, even though Carson was in charge of it now. I hope that deals always got better advertising. NBC would promote them on The Tonight Show, but when Carson had his own programs, they never did the same for him. CEOs at NBC still treated Hope like the real star, even when Carson's numbers went up. Carson was aware of this. It hurt like hell for a long time. Carson didn't hide how he felt when he was alone. Carson would make dark jokes with his team. When Hope got older and started messing up live shows by having trouble with her hearing aids, missing cues, and reading the wrong lines. During a break, he once said, "If I ever get like that, I want you guys to shoot me." It wasn't just one bad night. In private talks, he kept saying that he felt that way. At home, Carson would sometimes play Hope in a mean way while stumbling with cue cards. It was known as the Hope Shuffle among staff. Carson was scared and upset at the same time when he saw what Hope had turned into. Carson promised himself that he would never let himself get old on TV after seeing Hope cling to the attention. That is a big reason why Carson quit in 1992 while he was still in first place. Breakups of friendships didn't stop when Hope did. Another hard part was Joan Rivers. To begin with, Carson had found her. She had sucked on The Tonight Show with Jack Paar many years before. She was almost out of work, but Carson saw something in her. He hired her, praised her, and called her a star on live TV. She became one of the show's most famous guest hosts, and by 1983 she was filling in for Carson all the time. Carson was the one who got Rivers a job, she always said. Then there was the deception. Rivers was offered her own late-night show by the brand-new Fox network in 1986, right in the same time spot as Carson's show. They even said they would hire her husband to be the director. Carson didn't know from Rivers. She was scared. She was afraid that the deal would not go through. She also knew that NBC wasn't being fair to her because they only offered her a one-year deal while Carson got 2. Even worse, she learned that NBC wasn't even thinking about her as a possible replacement for Carson. Carson didn't hear the news from Rivers when it finally came out. It was in the trades. It was too late for her to call him. He hung up the phone and never called her again. Carson told Rivers she could never go on The Tonight Show again. Rivers didn't get a friendly goodbye or best wishes like other comics did when they quit or started competing shows. He erased her from the past of the show. He also made it clear to other people. A famous person who went on Rivers' new show would not be welcome back on Carson's pillow. It worked, the warning. Rivers' show had a hard time. It was dropped by stations. The sponsors pulled back. After less than a year, Fox fired Rivers. Edgar, her husband, killed himself not long after that. Rivers' plan to break through late at night didn't work out. She tried to make things right with Carson for the next 20 years. She even said hello to him in places. He wouldn't even look at her. She was very sad. Carson died in 2005, and Rivers still talked positively about him. However, she did say that she thought some of his anger came from the fact that she was a woman, and women weren't meant to leave the men who made them. Last time Joan Rivers was on The Tonight Show was during Jimmy Fallon's first show in 2014. That was almost 30 years after her last appearance. It made her feel sad. It was her winning lap, but Carson had already left. He never forgot about her. Once a teacher and a student, they never talked to each other again. At the start of the 1970s, Wayne Newton and Johnny Carson seemed like they were really friends. More than 30 times, Newton, who was known as Mr. Las Vegas, was on The Tonight Show. Carson always said nice things about him and made jokes about him when he came on. Both on and off TV, they looked like they had a strong relationship. They were both well known in Las Vegas and went to the same events and performed at the same venues. No one would have thought that a storm was slowly gathering behind the smiles. In 1980, things really went wrong. It was a dream of both Newton and Carson to own the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Carson and his business partner made a strong offer because they thought they had a good chance. He made a better deal, though, and won. Carson was very angry. His friends and family said he felt betrayed. He was so mad that he never really went back to Las Vegas. Newton won, but it was going to cost him a lot. Carson got angry when he lost the room and went on stage. He made fun of Newton every night in his speech. The jokes were mean. They made fun of Newton's looks, voice, and even said he wasn't strong enough. There were jokes that made it sound like Newton had shady ties to the mob. At that time, Carson had a lot of power. A lot of people watched his show, and the jokes started to make Newton look bad. Newton called Carson to try to work things out, but Carson never picked up. The hurt kept getting worse as the jokes kept coming. Newton was fed up at last. He broke into Carson's office during a meeting in 1982. He told Carson's producer to leave the room right away. Now it was just Newton and Carson. Newton didn't hold back. He was strong and angry. He told Carson that the jokes had to end right away, or there would be a fight. Carson tried to make him feel better by telling him he still liked him, but Newton didn't believe him. It was clear that the jokes were coming to an end. He stopped making jokes about Newton after that day, but the damage had already been done. Newton never went back to Carson's show. It got worse. The mob rumors kept spreading. Newton was linked to the Gambino crime family in an NBC report in 1986. Newton pushed back hard. He sued NBC and won a $19 million verdict. He won the case, but the court said there was no intent, so he didn't get any money. Newton said it was never about money. It was to get his name cleared. He always thought Carson's jokes were the ones that started it all. Newton called Carson a mean person even after Carson died in 2005, showing that some scars never heal. For the most part, Newton and Carson's fight happened behind the scenes. But Carson had another crazy event happen in public. Shelley Winters made news in 1975 when she poured a drink on Oliver Reed's head while he was being taped for The Tonight Show. Reed had said some racist things about women working in the kitchen, and Winters wouldn't have it. She fucked off, came back, and threw a whiskey drink right on top of his head. The crowd loved it. It became one of the most well-known things to happen on late-night TV. Winters was known for having conversations that were a mess. She loved making trouble. During an interview, she gave Carson an odd shoe and then started talking about a movie that had nothing to do with the question. Carson couldn't say anything. She made another joke about Reed's beard right after making a rude joke. It wasn't important to her to be neat or nice. It was all she wanted. A response. Carson didn't like that much chaos. He liked having power. He knew how to deal with strange people. But Winter was too much with his crazy energy. During one show, she kept making people talk about crazy things. Carson tried to pull things back with weird jokes about Hitler and Betty Davis's tennis balls, but it didn't work. He looked really upset because of his tight smile and short commercial breaks. Producers told Carson behind the scenes that Winters was one of the few people who really got under her skin. He tried to nod and move on most of the time, but Winters made that impossible. No matter what, she would keep going. Their fights on late-night TV showed that something bigger was going on. Carson liked telling funny jokes and having calm talks. During the winter, Winters put on messy, dramatic shows. Afterward, she said Carson didn't know how to deal with women who weren't shy and flirty. When Winters showed up drunk and slurring her words to promote her book in 1983, things got really tense between them. Carson joked that she had sold enough books in one night and stopped the interview early. Even though things were crazy, Winters kept getting asked back. She showed up 18 times over 20 years. The host of The Tomorrow Show, which ran right after The Tonight Show, was Carson's other big beef. Carson didn't just hate Snyder in private. He once talked badly about Snyder without holding back after a few drinks at Chasen's, a famous place in Los Angeles. He called Snyder a no-talent bore and tore apart his style. Carson didn't like how Snyder would take over chats and talk for hours on end. Even though Carson liked to be funny and get along with others, Snyder's need for debate and self-promotion made him even more angry. This was because Carson strived to please everyone. Snyder wasn't just dull to him. He was everything that was wrong with good TV. Other than that, Howard Stern had his own thoughts about Johnny Carson, and they weren't very nice. Stern said on his radio show after Carson's death that he had never been a fan, but he understood Carson's place in TV history. Stern even said that Carson hit his first wife at a party, and he talked a lot about Carson's mean side, saying that the nice Carson people saw on TV wasn't the real Carson. Stern may have been mad that Carson never asked him to the Tonight Show, which was a big deal back then. That being said, Stern did a lot of things that Carson did later on, like taking a lighter work schedule as he became more famous. After that, there was Chevy Chase. Sparks and Chase played poker together for years, but one of them was always ahead. Chase made things worse by making fun of the idea of leading a show like The Tonight Show in public, saying that he would never be tied down to one thing like that. Carson rarely took comments lying down, so he got back at them in a way that only he could. He once said, Chase couldn't ad-lib a fart after a baked bean dinner. Carson didn't give Chase any advice when he got his own late-night show in 1993. Carson also didn't try to hide how he felt. He told the press that Chase didn't look pleased on TV and that he didn't think Chase knew how tough the job was. Carson had a point. It was over for Chase's show after only 6 weeks. It was so tense that you could feel it through the screen when Chase and Richard Pryor went on Carson's show together live. When it came to guests, Carson didn't like it when people brought canned material and wouldn't interact freely. That's what Bob Hope was known for doing, bringing long, awkward highlight reels that made Carson mad. Carson wasn't happy about being used as a tool to make jokes. Carson was probably annoyed by Frank Sinatra Jr. in the same way that Carson was annoyed by Sinatra Jr. Carson liked real conversations more than plays. Carson's personal life was even more difficult when he wasn't in front of the camera. Even though he was married 4 times, the first 3 were not happy. Carson's first wife, Jody Walcott, went to parties and chatted with other men, which made Carson more and more jealous until they finally got a divorce in 1963. He was very angry with women, said his second wife, Joanne Copeland. He would sometimes wake her up by ripping the sheets off the bed and yelling about how hard he worked while she slept. Carson's third marriage to Joanna Holland was full of fear when he was drinking the most. Carson paid a huge price for all of these breakups, including a shocking $35 million settlement and making monthly payments to one ex-wife for the rest of his life. He didn't seem to be at peace until he married Alexis Moss at age 61. Carson still made a mean joke about how getting marriage help from him would be like getting directions from the captain of the Titanic. When his 39-year-old son Richard died in a terrible car accident in 1991, it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. His car went down a steep hill and crushed him. When it happened, Richard was taking pictures of the coast. Carson looked very broken when he went back to The Tonight Show. He held back tears as he showed pictures of his son and thanked the people in the room for being so kind. In the news stories, the only picture that was used was Richard's driver's license picture, and he wanted people to see who his son really was. Carson's grief brought to light something he had been hiding for years. He felt terrible about how little time he spent with his 3 boys. Carson was very private, even though he was the most popular TV host in the United States. Even his closest friends said he felt very awkward around other people. Dick Cavett once said that Carson was the shyest person he had ever met in real life. Carson had been using magic tricks as a cover at parties since he was a child. It was so bad for him that he would give reporters little cards with answers like yes, no, and kumquats already written on them. A director asked Carson for permission to make a documentary about him for 15 years, but Carson always said no because he thought The Tonight Show should speak for itself. Carson's drinking was another storm that no one saw. He said that drinking turned him from a friendly, fun-loving person into someone who was cold, angry, and sometimes violent. His second wife said it was terrible to live with him. Friends said that he could go from being nice to being mean in an instant. They thought Carson drank because he had a hard time with his emotionally distant mother, who never showed pride in him, even though he was famous and rich. Some people knew Carson as one of the most unhappy people they had ever met. Carson quit his job in 1992, and didn't make the process last long. He was sure he wanted to leave while he was still on top. He told them a year ahead of time and said goodbye in a simple, sincere way. After his last show, he was almost never seen again in public. Along with Alexis Moss, he spent his days traveling, getting better at Swahili for trips, and having private dinners with a small group of friends. Carson was in the spotlight the whole time. He had always been shy, and now he could finally live his life that way. The night of his last Tonight Show was a historic one for TV. Carson didn't have a lot of famous people on the show. Instead, he kept it quiet and personable. More than 55 million people watched. The most touching part happened the night before, when B. Carson rose to his feet, when Midler sang "One for My Baby." A rare moment of weakness caught on camera for all time. He thanked his audience with a broken voice on his last night, sitting alone on a stool. He said he felt lucky to be able to do what he loved. He said goodbye with a simple, emotional phrase: "I want to wish you a very good night." After 30 years, Johnny Carson was the head of late-night TV. But when he left, he never came back. Behind the jokes and fame was a man who struggled with loneliness, anger, and loss. The people who loved him never knew everything about him, even in his last days.